Good morning. I've been asked to speak for no longer than 20 minutes. There was to be time for questions, but I think we've dropped that idea. One of the benefits of the lights having dimmed is I can't see how many people have left the room. But I would reckon that 2/3 of the audience has now left. Now, I could take that personally, but I don't think it is personal. I think it reflects the difficulty in Barcelona of raising the issue of the sustainability of tourism here in what is still a great city, but a city with, I think, some problems around tourism. I asked for this to be left up while I began speaking because I noticed that one of the sponsors of today is the chic outlet shopping centre at La Roca Village. It would be interesting for you to know perhaps that Bicester Village, Value Retail, have in the last month approached me about doing some work with them on responsible tourism. I have to say to you that this is the first time, it's a unique experience for me to have people leave the room when the subject of sustainable and responsible tourism is raised. It's a unique experience for me, and it's one that I think we need to reflect on. But Robin, if we could go to the first slide, please. I've been asked to talk about what responsible tourism has to offer Barcelona and Catalonia. And if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about what tourism has to offer. I'm going to talk essentially about three things. I'm going to talk first about what is responsible tourism, secondly, about what it means for business, and thirdly, what it means for Barcelona. I'm also going to very briefly mention the conference that's taking place here next week. And what's interesting about the conference next week is at the moment we've got more paying delegates coming from outside of Catalonia than we've got coming from Catalonia. There are people interested to come to learn from Barcelona about how you're tackling the problems of sustainability. But there appears to be more interest outside of Catalonia than there is in it. What then is responsible tourism? It's about using tourism to make better places for people to live in and better places for people to visit. It's about responding to the challenges which every destination faces if it's to be sustainable in the future. And it's about addressing the economic, social, and environmental challenges. Ultimately, it's about what you do to reduce the negative impacts of tourism and to enhance the positive. If we ask what does it mean for business, sustainable tourism and responsible tourism are not the same thing. Responsible tourism is about taking responsibility for achieving sustainable development through tourism. It's about the contribution which tourism makes to the future of the city of Barcelona and of Catalonia. It's about better business for the businesses and for the destinations. Now, the idea of responsible tourism has caught on internationally. If you go to the next slide, Robin, you'll see this is the World Travel Market's adoption of the Cape Town Declaration concept of responsible tourism. For World Travel Market, as a global marketplace, it's become central to the way in which they see their activity. And in November, we'll have a large programme with over 2,000 participants at World Travel Market looking at responsible tourism. If we go to the next slide, which is about the business case for responsible tourism, you'll notice that it's the business cases, it's plural. There isn't only one case for responsible tourism. Partly people do it because it's the right thing to do. And I remind my students all the time that for a lot of people in business, the thing that motivates them is wanting to leave a better place, a better business, a better place when they move on to their next job. A lot of people in business are convinced of the importance of doing the right thing. But unfortunately, not all of them. It's about minimizing risk. And there are risks around tourism in Barcelona. We'll come on to talk about those. But you only have to sit at the cafe opposite this building in the morning and see the tourists arriving, and you see some of those risks. It's about license to operate. It's about having an environment where local people are willing to see tourists in large numbers. I've heard, while I've sat in the audience this morning, a lot of discussion about quality. And the quality of the product is vital to the future of a sustainable industry. It's also about cost savings, reducing the resource use, the resource consumption for any business as resources increase in cost makes the business more profitable. It's about staff morale. It's about keeping good staff motivated to provide good service. And it's about market advantage. It's about the experience which you can offer, a richer, more authentic, guilt-free experience for the visitors who come to Barcelona. It's about differentiating your product and your city from all of the others. It's about reputation, it's about referrals, and it's about encouraging people to come back. It is difficult to encourage referrals if people have experienced being robbed in the street or experienced the congestion in the Rambla. These, I think, are issues which affect the long-term sustainability of tourism in Barcelona. It's not just about sustainability. If we could go to the next slide, then we're there. It's about delivering what is offered. The idea of responsibility in business has been around for a very long time. It's not new. It's about, originally in tourism, it was about simply delivering a hotel which had been built. And you'll remember that problem from the early days of Spanish tourism. People turning up and there being no hotel. Then it was about making sure that what was sold was actually delivered. After that came financial protection and bonding, and then a lot of concern about health and safety, focus on quality, and meeting the expectations of the guests. Now, the next slide is the slide which represents ABTA, the UK Travel Association's trade association. It's their view of what the responsibility of their businesses and their members are. And you'll see there the explicit mention of creating rewarding jobs, of taking responsibility in a finite world. And you know about the problems of water supply in Barcelona, about thriving destinations, about quality product, and about the other things that trade associations concern themselves with. But it is noticeable, this commitment to rewarding jobs and thriving destinations. Now, I'm often asked, next slide, Robin, about why businesses should care for destinations. Firstly, I think it's because a great deal of why people come to visit Barcelona is about the public space in the destination. It's about how they will be able to use the Rambla. Will they enjoy the experience of being there? Will it create for them memories? Will it make them want to recommend other people to have the experience? But the problem about public space is that it has to be maintained. Tourists bring litter, congestion, antisocial activity. I've stood on the Rambla with my partner, with Kate, and watched people kicking the glass domes, the glass balls of the lamps around, watched by the police, who did not intervene. That's not a very good advertisement for Barcelona. And of course, tourists go away and they tell that story. Now, I'm fond of Barcelona. I haven't told that story anywhere else except in this city. But other people who've had the same experience will have told that story. And for us, it's inexplicable why the police do not intervene when that kind of behaviour is taking place. Your city is very vulnerable to being degraded by the tourists who are arriving in ever larger numbers. The question we have to ask, you have to ask particularly, is when does Barcelona cease to be attractive? You've had 20 years of spectacular growth. You're undeniably one of the world's most successful destinations. And I compliment you for that. You've clearly been brilliantly successful. What will it be like in another 10 years' time? We could go to the next slide, Roman. We know a few things about what constitutes a successful tourist destination in the long run. We know that it's about offering the visitor something unique. It's about creating a sense of place, a sense of identity, which is different from the competitors. And you have some real natural advantages in that. You have beaches, albeit artificial beaches, right in the city. You have some of the most spectacular architecture in the world. You have a great and honourable history. But will those things be sustained into the future? No two communities are ever exactly the same. But to be successful in the long run, what makes you different has to be sustained. And I give the example there of Ludlow, which seeks to treat all of its visitors as temporary residents. And that's a place that people go back to again and again and again. If we go to the next slide. What tourists are increasingly looking for is a quality experience, a distinctive experience of a place which is different. There's a lot of emphasis in the academic literature and in tourism marketing now on the experience economy. People are looking for memorable experiences. That's what's driving the increase in the amount of tourism. They're looking for engagement in the culture, the community, and the environment of the place that they visit. But of course, those memories, those experiences, have to be a shared product of the host and the guest. And one of the difficulties about the Rambla is it's quite possible to spend time on the Rambla and not meet anybody, apart from the shop assistants perhaps, and the cafe owners, who are from Barcelona. It's quite possible to spend an evening on the Rambla, to go to a restaurant on the Rambla or near the Rambla and be there only with other tourists. Now, for some market segments, that's fine. But I think for the market segments which Barcelona seeks to attract, that's a problem. Because what you want to create are those quality, in-depth memories, because it's those memories which create the viral marketing which every destination now needs. One of the panelists earlier was talking about the importance of social media. Cannot deny the influence that that will have on the shape of tourism in the future. If we go on to the next slide, Robin. What does then responsible tourism have? What does it mean for Barcelona? I think you had 7 million visitors last year. 14 million? 21 million? 28 million? When will you stop? It isn't going to just go on increasing, is it? Well, I have a strong sense, I've been in Barcelona, I've had the good fortune to be here at all times of the year. I have a very strong sense that Barcelona is full. How many more tourists can it take? Because never forget that people move on when a place gets spoilt. Can you click the slide, Robin? That's a genuine advertisement from a good UK tour operator called Cricketer Holidays. They only placed that advertisement once. But that is what tourists and tour operators think. Once a place is spoilt, we'll move on. And there are plenty of examples of places around the world where tourists have left in their droves, some of them in Spain, others in Greece. There are plenty of places which were once popular, British seaside resorts, which people have now left. And they've left because that place no longer provided them with the quality of experience that they wanted and were able to pay for. If you click the slide again, Robin. Can you go back? Could you go back, Robin? Yeah, that advertisement on the right there, that's a genuine advertisement from Wizz Air, which is a Hungarian cheap airline. I happen to be very fond of Warsaw and Krakow and Budapest. They are some of the world's great cultural cities, as is Barcelona. But I'm afraid that Barcelona is beginning to be regarded as a party city, a place to go for booze, for stag weekends, and to party. It's your city. It's not for me to say. Maybe you're happy with that. But that's the danger, particularly with the cheap, or some of the cheap airlines who will market you as a place to go for stag weekends. Amsterdam is working hard to turn its back on that market. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Dublin, they've all sought to turn their back on that market. The market's there. The question is whether you want to serve them. Go on to the next slide, please. Fast Track. Some of you may know it's a BBC programme shown on the World Service, shown all around the world. A couple of years ago, they made a 15-minute documentary around the question, is Barcelona being spoilt by tourists? Pointing to your success in having large numbers of visitors, but asking the question whether the place is being spoilt. If we go on to the next slide. This is a genuine piece from the Telegraph. Photograph of the Ramblers, and basically saying that in a survey by Virgin Financial Services of their customers, Barcelona was number 3 on the list of spoilt destinations. Now, you could shoot the messenger, and clearly some of the people, 2/3 of you, have already left the room. But it seems to me these are questions which Barcelona actually is addressing. I know Barcelona is addressing these questions, and that's why we brought the Responsible Tourism Conference here next week. But I'm left with a strong sense this morning that there's a lot of the industry which is not addressing these questions. We go on to the next slide, please, Robin. This is from a programme shown just a couple of weeks ago on Channel 4, the UK, about how pickpockets operate. Unfortunately, a lot of that programme was filmed in Barcelona. And it's quite clear that there's a big problem in this city about pickpocketing. It's also clear that there are parts of the city where the same gangs operate every night quite successfully. I've met people here, people who work here, not even tourists, who have been pickpocketed right by the taxi rank, and nobody has intervened to do anything about it. It's accepted here that pickpocketing happens. Tourists don't like it, you know. They really don't like it. They don't like the risk, and they don't like the consequence. And every tourist who's pickpocketed will talk about it. If you go on to the next slide, Robin. I'm sure you know about this. It's a Facebook page that talks about being robbed in Barcelona. And you heard this morning from the panellists here about the increasing importance of the social networks. You really need to be addressing these kinds of issues. And I realise that to some extent this is beyond the control of the tourism industry, but it's not beyond the control of the city. If you go on to the next slide, you'll be very familiar with this. It doesn't help when tourists see those kinds of posters around the city. And then if you go on again, another piece of social media, Barcelona is full. Don't come. At one level, that's amusing, and I agree. And let me be clear, you're not the only city facing this problem. There's a big problem in Berlin at the moment with a very major political movement in Kreuzberg against the volume of cheap tourism which has come in to that part of Berlin, and it's become a major political factor in that city. You're not alone in having this problem, but you do have the problem. Go on to the next slide, Robin, please. People talk about tourism as a clean industry. Unfortunately, that's not true. Tourism is not a pollution-free industry. On the contrary, tourism brings a lot of pollution with it. We know about the issue of carbon, and that's one that we'll be addressing in the second session of the conference next week. Carbon pollution as people arrive, but congestion, crime, prostitution. The serious change in the character of the city as locals are pushed out by tourism businesses. Look at Venice with its declining population, a city now which has become almost a Disneyland theme park, really ceased to be a city where ordinary people live and make their living. And of course for Catalonia, Barcelona is the historic capital of Catalonia. I'm sure that you don't want it to become a theme park for tourism. The city is clearly still doing really well, and perhaps you don't need to worry about these things. But I think the big question, and the one that really lies behind the conference next week, is will Barcelona use tourism to benefit Barcelona and the people who live here and the Catalans, or will Barcelona be used by tourism? Who will be in control? The people of Catalonia, the citizens of Barcelona, or will it be the tourism industry and the tourists? And if you look at what's happened in the Barcelona letter, it's quite clear to me that the tourists have really displaced the local population from that quarter of the city. Barcelona needs to remain competitive and cool. It needs to be creating those memories which will bring people back time and time again. And I think to do that, there needs to be a lot of emphasis on the changes in policy which are coming from the political leaders in this city. And it's because of that and our desire to support that trend that we brought the International Conference on Responsible Tourism in Destinations here to Barcelona next week. Can we go to the next slide, Robin, please? RTD 7 then is taking place next week in the city. It's over 4 days. There's an academic day on the first. On the second, there's an excursion day, which is now full. And then on the third and fourth, there are the 2 industry days, which are taking place here in the city. There are 5 themes about taking responsibility for the environmental impacts of tourism, and clearly water will be a major part of those discussions, and carbon. The role of government in the planning and management of destinations. We have someone here from Cape Town who'll be talking about the challenges that they face in the same way that Barcelona does. Talking the third theme about sense of place, about local communities and the visitor experience. The fourth theme is talking about the extension of participation in tourism, about access of all, for all, whether for small entrepreneurs, for the socially disadvantaged, or for those with physical and other disabilities. And then the fifth theme, looking at the management of cruise tourism in the Mediterranean. You can still register for the conference, and the conference website is there. If you go to the next slide, Robin. The speakers at the conference, we have a few from Catalonia, not as many as I would have liked to see. We have 7 speakers from TUI Travel. We have speakers from Intercruises. We have the managing editor of Travel Trade Gazette doing an interview session on the Friday morning. We have a speaker, Nikki White, from ABTA, who's responsible for destinations for the UK Trade Association. We have the head of destinations for Visit England. We have the head of external affairs for Thomas Cook, and we have a senior executive from NH Hotels. The industry outside of Barcelona has taken this conference very seriously. They're sending high-profile speakers to Barcelona to talk about the challenge of responsible and sustainable tourism. On the second day of the conference, there'll be a closing and a declaration, the 2020 vision for responsible tourism from Catalonia, the Barcelona Declaration. That is already partly drafted, been working with the partners around the conference on that. It will be your declaration, it won't be the conference's. I would encourage you to be there, to be part of shaping that declaration, and to be there when it's presented at the end of the conference on the Friday night. And of course, Friday night as well is the first, it's the inaugural awards for the Catalan Responsible Tourism Awards, which we hope will become an annual event. Thank you for listening to me, those of you who stayed for it. I see that the panellists have arrived for the next session. You may, of course, choose to shoot the messenger. That's an honourable and long tradition. I'm sorry that there isn't going to be time for questions, but I hope that I'll see at least some of you at the conference next week. Thank you for listening.